Hey guys, today I'll be answering the question, which Fuji X lens is best for vlogging? Most of our video reviews come out of a sincere curiosity, and this one is no exception. There are a lot of Fuji X lenses that could work great as vlogging lenses, but I'd like to know which is the very best for us. And before we dive into answering that question, I do want to give a big thank you to KEH.com, who has been letting us borrow a bunch of these zoom lenses to play with. This has helped us make several videos, and if you have found that helpful, maybe you could show your gratitude to KEH by heading over there the next time you need to buy some used camera gear. There you'll find reliable quality scores, great prices, and a 180-day return guarantee. You can find a link in the description to more information and discounts. So thanks again, KEH. So let's look at these lenses, and when we do so, keep in mind that when it comes to vlogging, there really is only one requirement, and that is that it's a wide lens. And on the Fuji APS-C devices, the sweet spot tends to be somewhere between 14 millimeters and 18 millimeters focal length. Anything past 14 millimeters and things start to get distorted, you get just too much stuff in the background, it's kind of distracting. I don't feel like it's very pleasant. And if you want to bring this in to bring, the subject yourself more in frame, well then you're really distorted. All you're getting is nose and eyeballs. But when you start to move past 18 millimeters, things start to get really tight and really uncomfortable for everyone. So if we're looking for lenses within that sweet spot, we actually have a pretty massive selection to choose from. Really any lens you see here will work for vlogging in a pinch, but we're not here to answer which lens will just work. We want to see which is best. So let's go ahead and start eliminating some of these lenses from the equation. I already said that being a wide lens was the most important requirement, but the next most important qualification, in my opinion, is that it should have optical image stabilization, or OIS. Lenses that have OIS, they have a small gyro inside that keeps the optics more stable. So even though you might be filming yourself within your laundry room with a camera sitting on the washing machine, your footage will still look fantastic. Whereas shooting with one of the Fuji prime lenses or with one of the 2.8 aperture zoom lenses won't work as well from the vantage point of the washing machine. Of course, if you shoot with the X-H1, that requirement goes away. In fact, the X-H1 gets more stabilization when you're mounting the prime lenses rather than the optically stabilized zoom lenses. So for you X-H1 users, I can already tell you which lens I think you'll be most happy with as a vlogging lens, and that is this guy, the 16mm 2.8 fast at focusing, sharp, light, beautiful lens. This is the perfect angle for vlogging, and with that IBIS on the X-H1 will get you super smooth footage. So if you shoot with X-H1, you could probably stop watching now. Unless you want a zoom lens, then keep watching because we will get into that. But we don't shoot with the X-H1, we shoot with the X-T3 for vlogging. So we do need some OIS built into that perfect vlogging lens. And that requirement for us eliminates the prime lenses from the equation. So we'll go ahead and remove them. Also with the 2.8 zoom lenses, these are excellent lenses, but they're not optically stabilized, and since they are massive to boot, they probably aren't ideal for vlogging, so we'll eliminate these as well. And that also brings up the third requirement, and that is that a good vlogging lens should be lightweight. A lot of the time we're holding the rig up with one hand, and any weight savings will really go a long way in getting the best possible footage for the longest periods of time. So that means we're going to be eliminating this guy right here, the 16 to 135 variable aperture, 18 to 35 variable aperture zoom lens. This one's on the edge, and for some of you with larger muscles than me, maybe you'll be fine with this one, but for a lens that weighs over a pound, which this one does, I think it's got to have some unique features that set it apart. And with a lens like this one, the 16 to 80 to compare it to, a fixed aperture 16 to 80 zoom lens, you get a little more range out of this one, but not enough to make the weight worth it, in my opinion. So we'll go ahead and eliminate that one. So now we're down to 5 lenses. On this side, we have the more affordable, plasticky, and significantly lighter XC lenses. And over here, we have 3 XF lenses, which have higher build quality, but also a bit more heft to them. And before we go any further, I just want to say that any of these 5 will probably work great as a vlogging lens. So if you already have one of these, that's great, use it. No need to spend more money or spend more time watching this video. But again, I want the best. So if you're like me, let's keep digging. Yesterday I had a family portrait shoot in Snow Canyon, and so afterwards I took the opportunity of that beautiful location to test some of these lenses. And the first lens I want to talk about is the tiny 15 to 45 millimeter 3.4 to 5.6 kit lens. The thing about this one, it's probably fine for vlogging most applications, but the zoom is mechanical. So as you can tell, kind of goes pretty slow, and I don't really have any way to know if it's zoomed out or not. Whereas the other lenses, you know, you can kind of tell if it's zoomed out or not because they have external zoom. So I feel like if you vlog with this, you're gonna have to leave it wide all the time and not zoom with it unless you're, you know, doing B-roll. But in addition to that, there are 2 other issues with the 15 to 45. First is that it's just loud when it zooms, which is not great for on-camera miking. And additionally, more than any of the other lenses, I find that the focus tends to be more sluggish and strangely steppy. You do get some steppiness with Fuji lenses when it comes to focusing sometimes, but it's way worse with this guy. And that leads me to want to eliminate this guy from the lens lineup. And with that gone, let's circle back onto the issue of OIS, because there really isn't a lot of information out there, and I'd love to know which of these 4 remaining lenses do stacked up next to each other when it comes to stabilization. All right, so here we go. We're testing the stabilization, I guess. This is not going to be a super scientific test. Just see if there's any like huge measurable difference between these lenses. And for this test, initially we got the 16 to 80 here on the X-T3U, and over here we've got the 10 to 24 on the X-T2. We're at 16 millimeters, the widest of this one, and not about the mid-range of this one. Just walking around here one-handed. As I study this footage, it really is close, but it seems to me that the 10 to 24 edges out the 16 to 80 ever so slightly. So just to be sure, I also conducted a super scientific washing machine test. And this seems to support the conclusion that the 10 to 24 is more stable when comparing these 2 lenses at the 18mm focal length. Now let's compare the OIS of the very similar 18 to 55 2.8 to f4 lens with the 16 to 80 f4 lens. This place is beautiful. One of my favorite places in the world to do portrait shooting, Snow Canyon. The sun has gone down now, but you still see over here we've got the light can bounce off those hills over there, back over here, which is just glorious. You get this backdrop back here, these cliff walls. It just provides an excellent backdrop for a family session that I do right here. So blah bitty blah, nobody cares. So as I study these lenses, keep in mind we're comparing these at slightly tighter focal lengths of 18mm. And as we do that, it appears to me that the 16 to 80 might just be slightly better. And just to double check that, I also compared these 2 lenses with the absolutely reliable washing machine test, and indeed, the 16 to 80 appears to be more smooth. So our last test is the best of the XC lenses, the plasticky 16 to 50 variable aperture, and the winner of the XF lenses, the 10 to 24 f4. And from both the walk around test and the washing machine test, we find that the 10-24 is victorious. Keep in mind, with the washing machine test, you don't get this on the camera, but the machine is creating quite a bit of bouncing around, and I'm really impressed at how smooth the 10-24 is in spite of that. Second place, I'd say, is a tie between the 16-80 and the 16-50, both of which are fairly smooth with just some slight waviness happening. The last, that 18-55, is not nearly as impressive as the others. Maybe that shouldn't be too surprising, as this is older than the rest of these lenses, but it is what it is. So that's interesting, and it makes me like the 18-55 less for vlogging. Add to that the issue of zooming with a variable aperture lens, and I like this lens even less. As anyone who does video on the Fuji devices, like me, you have had to put up with that weird phenomenon of where zooming quickly with a Fuji zoom lens, even with a fixed aperture, even shooting in manual settings, causes a sudden and slight dip to exposure. But when you zoom with the variable aperture lenses when shooting wide open and you have your auto ISO on, you'll get it even worse. You'll get that exposure dipping as it tries to compensate for the aperture that is changing. This is why I don't love vlogging with 18-55 or really any variable aperture zoom lens. I end up getting this annoying exposure bounciness in my footage when I pull the camera around to capture something interesting happening somewhere else. With the fixed f4 aperture lenses, you don't get that quite so much, that bouncing. So it's another factor to consider. But if that doesn't put the nail in the coffin for this lens for me, what does is that 18mm widest focal length. It's just not wide enough for me. So this isn't too bad. It's not ideal, and I'm an average height person. I'm about 5'11", with average arm length. But if you're shorter than me, you have shorter arms, you're gonna be more like maybe this, and I just feel like 18mm is maybe pushing it. But it's probably okay for me, for full HD. But in 4K mode, so here in 4K, you can see that you get more of a crop, and everything is just, it's just way too tight, in my opinion, for a vlogging lens. All right, so the 18-55 over here, the 16-80 over here, this is an f4 aperture on the 16-80, whereas on the wide end with the 18-55 we have a 2.8 aperture lens. That allows us to get a stop, maybe more of light gathering ability out of that 18-55, and that makes it nice for conditions such as these where the sun has gone down, we're in the blue hour, we have to crank the ISO or start to. So over here on the 18-55 with the 2.8 aperture, the ISO is at 250, whereas over here on the 16-80, the aperture is set to 640. So I don't know the math right off, but I think that's about a stop and a bit of difference between these lenses. Now, that's not a huge difference, but if you shoot in low light a lot, you'll know every little bit helps, every little bit makes a difference. So the real question is, do you want to shoot with something that will give you a little bit better low light performance and sacrifice that wide end, that 16mm wide end, all the way to an 80 telephoto that you get with that 16-80 f4? Is low light that important to you? That's the real question here. So between all those drawbacks and low light shooting aside, that's going to make me want to eliminate the 18-55, unfortunately. I really do love that lens for photography, but for vlogging, it's not the best. So when it comes to focal length, the thing I like about the 16-80, in addition to the 16mm wide end, is that when I want to turn that camera around and get things at a distance, that 80mm is a really good working distance. With the 10-24, I find that the 24 often isn't telephoto enough to capture the details and get a sense of place. So it's just a bit too wide for me. And with the 16-50, 50 is fine, but it's not 80. And I also have to deal with the variable aperture with this one. But maybe for some of you, it's a bigger deal even than low light shooting, than having a fixed aperture, superb image quality, and focal distance. The real need you have is a lens with weather resistance. For the way that we vlog and the locations we go to vlog in the dry Utah, Nevada deserts, I really appreciate having some protection against sand and dust because it really does get everywhere and into anything. Of course, I also find myself in rain on occasion, but it's the sand that's the biggest problem. And if we look at these last three lenses, there's only one of them that has weather resistance, and that is the 16-80 f4. So at this point, you can probably see where this is going. The 16-80 f4 is probably the perfect vlogging lens from the Fuji system system, and it's the one that I'm going to name the Champion. Now this isn't a perfect lens, and there are plenty of photographers ho-humming it for what they perceive as image quality imperfections. I have yet to really dive into those, but from a vlogger standpoint, it really does check off the most crucial boxes. However, these two lenses are right behind it. If you're on a budget and you don't need weather resistance and you don't mind a variable aperture, this 16 to 80, 3.5 to 5.6 is highly underrated, and I think it'll do just fine for 90% of you vloggers out there. And if you do get this, either get it on a kit or buy it used from KEH from folks who have sold it from their kit. It's a great value for $1 if you do it that way. And finally, if you prefer shooting wide, the 10 to 24 takes the third place spot in my mind. It wins the award for the best stabilization, and its image quality is probably the best of these three when it comes to photography. But that's all I've got for you guys. Hopefully you found this helpful in some way. Remember to do good with your camera, and we'll talk to you again real soon.